everyone! I'm Heather. I'm back for a really quick video. This one to do with sort of wrapping up the last half of or Novellas in November. So as I've said before, I love novellas, and I think that I could have happily devoted my entire month of November just to like banging out a million novellas. But because it was quite a busy month reading wise, I did Believe-a-thon and I had like Thanksgiving-y type books in my mind that I was going to read. I didn't get to devote loads and loads of time to Nov. And my original Nov TBR got blown out the water. I think of the 6 that I was going to read for that, I read like 2 of them, and the rest I read were just like random ones I came up with sort of during the month, which is really cool. And that was my favorite part of doing Nov, is that it was sort of on my radar, looking specifically for novellas, and I found an absolute gazillion of them that I ended up really liking. So, result. So now I'm gonna just sort of lay out the last 4 that I read. So I did a video for the first half of the novellas I read for the month, and then I did like a haul of all of the novellas that I have acquired just in the month of November, which I don't like to think about because it's no space in my house, and I will sort of link those to the bottom if you care. But now, in the last half of November, I read 4 novellas, and that is mainly because I was panic listening to audiobooks, because all of the novellas on my library audiobook app that I have, I'd reserved loads of them thinking, ooh, I want to get these novellas in, look at all these amazing novellas, and I just like reserved them, and then they all came up at once in the way of annoyingness that is libraries. However, I blitzed through them like a crazy person and absolutely loved the last half of November for that reason. You know, I was never doing anything and not listening to an audiobook that was like basically making life amazing. Right, okay, so normally when I have, when I'm reading a book or whatever and I have the actual book with me, it sort of helps me to have it and to sort of remind me what it is that I was reading about and sort of my thoughts on it at the time. But when I have an audiobook, it's really hard to talk about it afterwards because there's nothing physical to sort of have in my hand to remind me about what it was that I was thinking when I was going through it. So anyway, I do like a notebook thing, like, to sort of like put my thoughts out on paper as I'm listening to it. But when you're listening to something and you're like making food, it's hard to sort of get to it. So I feel like my thoughts aren't going to be as cohesive as I would like them to be. But basically my mind is chaos anyway. Like, does anyone do that 16 personalities thing, that like Myers-Briggs or whatever, where it's the letters? So mine is INFP, which is apparently to do with trapped creative chaos quite a lot of the time. So like my mind is just over creative and creating all the time and just lives completely in chaos, and I have to like express myself creatively or else like the chaos will engulf me. Like I need to express creatively in order to make order of the world. Do you know what I mean? I'm like, I didn't really think about that in my life at all. Until, I was like reading through these like personality things and I was like, holy crap, that's me. Like when I'm feeling really depressed and I'm not like going through my hobbies and stuff, like I always have 84,000 hobbies on the go. And when I'm not in my hobbies because I'm depressed and just sitting on the sofa and like watching episodes of Friends or whatever, like my mind just goes into chaos and my life goes into chaos, and I like forget to like pay bills and to like get up in the morning and stuff. Like there's no order to my life unless I have like things in which to splooge my like mind's creativity into physical form. Anyway, that was like a bit of a ramble, but getting back to the point, which is like, you know what? I actually don't remember the point. So let's just get to the novellas, shall we? I read 4 novellas. 2 of them I thought were quite good, and 2 I thought weren't as good. One of which I really didn't like, and one of which I really did like, and then the other 2 are sort of like, just to the side of good and just to the side of not so good. So I'll start with The Vegetarian. by Han Kang, which I did really like. But I think in the end I found it more just quite shocking than enjoyable. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's on my half of good, but the one that's just sort of barely on the half of good. And that's after I spent ages sort of thinking about it. Because directly after finishing it, I was like, I don't know how to feel. Like, I have so many emotions and so many questions and do not understand if I liked that or didn't like it. And it took me ages of thinking about it and like digesting it. Do you know what I mean? And like talking to some people in work who have read it, you know, and explaining it to other people who haven't, for me to decide, okay, yes, I think I did like it. But mainly, I found it just shocking. So it's about this woman in Korea who has these nightmares about like blood splatters and all this sort of stuff, really horrible nightmares, that cause her to become a vegetarian. She gives up meat completely, just cold turkey, everything. And she lives in this sort of conservative Korean society where it's very important to sort of follow the social rules. This sort of like her giving up meat and becoming a vegetarian is seen as like a really dangerous kind of rebellion and like a mental illness. Like, how dare you just give up meat? Like, we're Koreans, we eat meat, you know? So it sort of manifests itself later in just these like most shocking things. Like the husband, she gives up sleeping with the husband because he smells like meat, because he eats meat. So he's like always nagging her. He's like, what is wrong with you? Why can't you make me meat anymore? Like, we're meat eaters. What is your problem? Are you ill? And then because he continues to eat meat, he's like smells like meat to her, so she won't sleep with him. So then he's gotta, you know, rape her, as you do. Like, I did not see that coming, and I was shooketh, okay? But then sort of her family as well, like her dad is really strong sort of guy, like basically abusive, but he's not sort of like described as abusive. I think he's described as like, you know, strong and strict and everything like this. But there's like an episode where they're all sitting down, her and her sister and her sister's husband and her husband and her parents, and her dad like force feeds her meat. And he's like, hold her down, hold her down. They're like holding her down, and he's like forcing it in her face, which is like really brutal and horrendous, and also like made me really uncomfortable and uneasy for like the rest of the effing day, basically. But also, like, all of these people who are really put off by her and her being a vegetarian, like the husband divorces her and everything. The brother-in-law, so her sister's husband, is really like turned on towards her and wants to put her in his art. Like, he's an artist and he's like obsessed with her and he keeps thinking about her and he just like really wants to sleep with her. Like, I don't want to give loads of it away, but it's crazy. It's crazy to think about. Like, her sort of minor acts of rebellion are sort of seen as, you know, some sort of dangerous thing to do, some sort of like subversive behavior, you know, like, I don't know, like antisocial behavior or like terrorism or whatever. And I think it does then lead to genuine mental illness, or like, it's hard to say if the sort of basis of the mental illness was there and caused the vegetarianism and then progressed into mental illness, or if like her sort of normal reaction of wanting to be a vegetarian and then other people's pushback then led to mental illness. Like, it's hard to sort of see the path. But anyway, this has had me thinking about absolutely loads of stuff. Like, it's sort of like a bit of like a feminist sort of thing. Like, you know, that women are sort of put in this place to where they have to obey their husbands and they have to obey their parents and blah, blah. And it's also like this sort of, this sort of commentary on like conservative Korean culture. It's also, I think, quite a lot of things to think about regarding like mental illness and like the path into mental illness. I don't know, I just have so many questions and so many thoughts. Has anyone read this book? I imagine quite a lot of people have. If you've read this, please, like, give me some, you know, of your thoughts down the bottom or whatever. Like, I need to have some sort of conversation about this book. I just need help digesting all of my emotions. Anyway, so I would give this guy like a good 4 stars. You know, not my favorite book. I think the majority of the reason I liked it is that, you know, it allowed me to devour the entire thing basically in a whole day and then just spend the rest of the time thinking about it and being shocked, which is, you know, positive I think, in Bookland. Something that, like, takes up your whole attention without making you bored, and then makes you just think about it for ages, and, like, just on the bus, like, what has happened? Anyway, the next one I'll go to is the other one that I was sort of okay about, you know, but on the other side of good. Like, I didn't love it, I didn't hate it, but, like, I don't know, it didn't really live up to what it was supposed to live up to. I think loads and loads of people actually really love this book, and the author, back, I cannot think of her name. I'm gonna put it somewhere, like there, or there, or there, or like here. She wrote another one recently that just came out, like Olive or something. I will also put that somewhere on the screen. But loads and loads of people have been jumping onto that one because they loved her other book that was before that in the series, and they just really love her writing, you know. So I was like, yes, I'm going to be really excited about this, and this may be one of the problems. I just sort of went into it thinking it's going to be really amazing. But then I sort of just found it a bit blah, and maybe a bit boring-ish. So my name is Lucy Barton, and this woman, she's a mother of 2 girls. She's in the hospital. Like, she had apparently what was supposed to be like a normal operation, just really routine, but then I guess there were complications or whatever, and it's caused her to then need loads and loads of recovery time. She's been in the hospital for ages, and people were worried that she actually would recover. You know, there's quite a lot of like anxiety surrounding this, and she has like other operations, and they sort of spend a lot of time thinking that she's going to have this, but then she doesn't have that, and blah blah blah. So her husband hates hospitals for some reason. He refused to come and visit her, and they don't really want the 2 daughters, because they're quite young, they don't really want them to be there in the hospital either, because it's really like harsh on them seeing their mother look so skinny and ill, and seeing all these like dying people around. So the husband and the kids don't really go to visit her that often, even though she's there for a really long time. So the husband sends Lucy Barton's mother to come and stay with her in the hospital. And she just shows up one night, and you're like, oh, amazing. But then very quickly you find out that their relationship is super strained and weird, and why it is like that isn't completely clear. But it's based in her childhood somehow. So Lucy Barton grew up really poor, like not just, you know, oh, I can't have an Xbox, you know, I can't afford it, but like as in I can't afford like basic food and heating and shelter and stuff like that. They lived in like a garage or something and were constantly cold. So she used to go to sort of school and spend loads of extra time at school because it was warm there, and she was reading. She really likes books. And they talk a lot while she's there, and they just talk about sort of nothingness, like reminiscing about people and sort of things that happened. And also Lucy Barton sort of like does a narrative of what happened in her childhood sort of on the side, and it just sort of all occurs in this hospital in this span of time, and it's mostly made up of conversations between her and her mother, or her reminiscing about her relationships with people. And I normally would really like that. I really like sort of a focusing on like the emotional aspect of life, or like people's relationships with each other. But I think I just found it annoying because I don't really understand why completely. But the relationship with the mother is really strained, and it's obviously caused by the mother being a bit of a dick. Like, okay, she's like emotionally stunted for some reason. She has guilt about the way that her kids have grown up. You know, human relationships are complicated, and obviously that's part of the beauty, that the relationship was written in a way that's real. There's no sort of defining aspects of it. You know, it's all a bit up in the air. No one really understands it completely, because that's like the nature of human relationships. Okay, whatever. Like, Lucy, like, at one point is like, mother, do you love me? And the mother, like, refuses to say that she loves her. But then she's like, oh, if my eyes are closed, do you love me? And the mother says, oh, if your eyes are closed. And she says, so you love me? And she's like, when your eyes are closed, you know, like, she's saying, I do love you, but she refuses to say, I love you. And then, like, Lucy has to go to this really scary sort of MRI thing, or this scary test, or this scary operation or something. And right when it's happening, the mother's like, it's time for me to leave. And she just gets up and goes. And it's obviously, like, you know, that she's afraid for the daughter, and she's like finding it hard to be there with her while this is happening because she loves her dearly. But the daughter's really scared, and now the mother's just leaving abruptly. And you know, even sort of later in time when like the mother's sort of leaving or whatever, and you know, the daughter's like, oh mom, I'll miss you, and the mother's like, yes you will, you know, like you have to just be strong about it. Like, I don't know, like I understand it's complicated, but most of the time I was just thinking this could all be fixed by you just like hugging your daughter, you dick. But obviously the book is primarily about like the complicated and like immensely formative and important relationships between mothers and daughters, and I feel that, okay, like I cried at the end. um but also I just sort of like was annoyed, like why is this happening when it could easily be solved by you just going, yes daughter, I do love you because I'm your mother. I don't know, it's hard to say, it's hard to say. Anyway, I'm gonna give that one like a good 3 stars. Like, wasn't bad, I sort of liked it. You know, loads of people like this author. It's pretty good. Whatever. I'm gonna go now to the one that I didn't like. And this one is City of Ghosts by Victoria Schwab. Okay, I love Victoria Schwab. Seriously, like, I really liked her Darker Shades series. There's like 3 of those. And I've read the first one of like the Vicious series of the villains or whatever, and I really liked that one. I haven't read any more of those, not because I didn't like Vicious, but because I just haven't had time. But I thought, oh, it's a novella and it's written by Victoria Schwab, who I love. This is going to be amazing. But I don't know what is wrong with it. Maybe because it's YA. I think it's YA. And the rest of the stuff that I've read from her has been like adult type fiction. Maybe that's the problem. But I found it, yeah, like really weirdly childish, you know, and childish as in immature writing and plot. Do you know what I mean? Because I spent this whole month reading kids' books, and they were amazing and weirdly adult in like their themes and in their writing and things like that, even though they're actually officially kids' books. But this one, I think, like didn't do it for me. All of the sort of plots and like themes and characters and everything were weirdly sort of underdeveloped and underwritten. Anyway, so this girl, she is a teenager and she has a near-death experience, which is similar to Vicious actually, and I thought, oh yeah, love that. And it causes her to be sort of half in, half out of this like ghost world. So now she's able to see ghosts, and actually her best friend is a ghost. His name is Jacob. And her parents are like these weird ghost hunter type people. Like, obviously they don't see ghosts. They just are ghost hunters. And they do this TV show, and for the TV show they go to Edinburgh and they take their daughter with them. And I sort of liked that, in that I went to Edinburgh when I was the same age as her, like 16ish. And I remember thinking a lot of the same things that she thought. Like, she's really confused about sort of the differences between American things and British things. And I remember doing those same things. It was sort of my first introduction to like things that are different between Britain and America. And I sort of thought that that was going to be really good. But in the end, it was just a bit like over-explained and immature, and I don't know, like the writing was not on point for me in this particular thing. But anyway, she meets another girl who's like her, named Laura or Lara, and she's also sort of in between the ghost world and the normal world. And she says to her, oh, like the reason we're like this is that our job is to send ghosts on, like they're trapped in this land of ghostiness, and we've got to sort of, you know, like kill the ghosts, like we have to send them on to their next existence or whatever. So this girl is like, okay, I'll team up with you and like we'll see what we can do. And she ends up being like attacked by this vicious creature in the ghost world who just wants her light and like her life, and wants to turn it into her own life so that she can become alive again and not a ghost. And so she's got to, you know, fight that off. Like, I won't tell you loads of it just in case you do want to read it. But in the end, it just sort of ended. It was like this, like building up and building up and building up, and then it was like, oh, well, everything's okay now. Cool. Like, the ending was unsatisfying, the beginning was unsatisfying, the whole of the book was unsatisfying, and I'm annoyed because it's made me think Victoria Schwab, what is your problem? Why were all your other things so amazing and this one was so crap? But I guess it's just a difference between her adult ones and her YA ones or something. I don't know. Life is hard. Okay, so for the last one, it is the one that I did really, really like. But I don't know, to be honest, if the reason I liked it is because of the author and the writing and the story and everything, or if it's just because it's based on the life of a real person that had a super interesting life. Like, it may just be, like, even if it was written by, like, somebody else, you know, or, like, a bunch of monkeys with typewriters in a room, like, would it still be good? And the answer is probably, because her life was nuts. I had no idea how nuts her life was. And, I feel like anyone telling that story, it would still be a good story. But anyway, it's called The Only Woman in the Room, and it is by... dear God in heaven. I don't normally do this. I always know who the author is, but I've done it twice now. Okay, I'll put it here. It's like because I don't have the book with me and I don't see the book all the time in my hand, so I don't like constantly have it like nailed into me who it is. So when I first started this book, it's just, I think someone online said it was really good, and I didn't read what they said about it so much as I just remember seeing that they put it up and said, oh, it's really good. And I obviously internalized that without really thinking about it. And then I was going through my library audiobook app looking for novellas, and I saw that one come up and I was like, oh, I'll just put it on reserve. And then it came up at the same time as literally every other book I've ever ordered on the planet, so I had to read it really fast and knowing basically nothing about it. I didn't know who it was about or what it was about or anything, literally. So as I'm sort of going through it, I'm like, wow, this is like quite an interesting story. And it's only a little bit later that it hits me that it's about Hedy Lamarr. Okay, this like 1930s, 1940s actress who was in like loads of movies at that time and was like huge star. If you can't think who she is, just Google her now and her face will come up and you'll be like, oh my God, yes, I remember her. I know her from like so-and-so movie or whatever. At the beginning, she's in Austria and she's a really young actress. She's in plays and stuff like that. She was also in one movie called Ecstasy, which is like mildly pornographic in the 30s, which is amazing. So then she marries this guy, this like really rich Austrian guy who's actually an arms dealer. And he's really against Austria being taken over by the Germans. Like, he wants to maintain an independent Austria in the war, and in the end that's lost, obviously, you know. But as soon as the Anschluss happens and the countries are sort of together, the arms dealer then just switches sides. He's like, okay, well, we're all Nazis now, awesome. Whereas Hedy Lamarr, she's part Jewish, she's like, I'm not having this, you know. Also, the arms dealer husband is really controlling and brutal toward her and like quite abusive and traps her in the house and stuff. She's not allowed to leave. He's really crappy toward her. She decides to escape. This is all kicking off. She's like, I need to leave. So she like dresses up in all of her jewelry, or like most expensive clothes and jewelry and everything. And then sort of leaves the party and like squirrels away all of this stuff and then dresses up like a maid and escapes in the night and ends up in England. And she sort of gets a contract with a movie company in Hollywood and then moves to California, and she stars in loads of movies, gets married approximately 8,000 times and lives like a crazy Hollywood life. But sort of in the background she's got this like survivor's guilt. So she was able to escape Austria. She's part Jewish, and you know, horrible things are happening in her home country while she's in like glittering beautiful Hollywood, and all of these Jews are dying, and no one in America really is allowed to know that the Jews are dying because no real information about that filters out of these countries until after the war. So she's got sources who say about it and she knows, but no one else really knows. All of the Americans are just sort of like caught up in their own glittery unwar tensioned lives, you know, and she feels really horrendous. So she's like, I need to do something to sort of assuage my guilt about being someone who's escaped alone without anyone else and just like left all of my people there to suffer. So she adopts this European kid who has no family left, though after, nothing to do with the book, just with like Hedy Lamarr's life, this kid that she adopted apparently has found some sort of evidence or whatever that actually he was Hedy Lamarr's love child. So he's actually, you know, her son, but like she couldn't say that he's her son. She had to say, oh, I've adopted him, but whatever. Like the book is like, nah, he was adopted from Europe because his family was killed in the war. But then also she like teams up with this other guy, this like composer guy, to invent a thing that like allows warships to better control their torpedoes and like makes it impossible for them to be like intercepted or to go off course or something like this. I didn't fully understand the science because I'm like, science. Ugh. But she's apparently this sort of brilliant inventor, and she invented this thing, and according to the book, the only reason they didn't use it is because she's a woman, and they felt really uncomfortable about trying to like convince the whole of the army and the military and the navy to use this thing that was invented by a woman and a movie star to boot. But sort of reading a bit more about it, it was sort of more political than that. But they did keep that technology on file and they kept it around, and they did start using it in the 60s. And then they moved that technology on by increments, and then eventually it became like Bluetooth technology and all this stuff. Like she's basically a brilliant inventor, and she spent quite a lot of her time in all these like lavish parties and stuff in Austria for her husband, like listening to fascist leaders and like Nazis and everything talk about big plans that they have. So she was able to sort of squirrel away all of this like huge political information about the Axis powers and like their plans in the war and all this stuff, which is crazy. But anyway, I absolutely loved that one. I devoured it in like a matter of a few hours. It's hard, like again, I'll say, it's hard to say why it is that I love it so much. Is it because the story is really well written? Or is it because I just love me an amazing celebrity memoir? I just devour these celebrity memoirs. I love them. To like see a person on a movie and to think, oh, they're this sort of movie star or whatever, and then to find out that their actual real lives are so crazy. Like they live these bonkers lives, and I love that, and I just like devour that sort of thing. But if you don't know anything about Hedy Lamarr, oh my god, you should read this book. It's so good. Okay. Right, that's all I've got for Nov. That's the last 4 that I read. I think that brings my novella total for Nov to 8. Onward into December. If anyone has any thoughts at all about Nov, or what you read in November, or any of these books, or similar books, or whatever, or what you're going to read in December, or whatever, just let me know. I'm 100% all ears. I'm going to go make a sandwich.